Hi, and welcome to Chapter 5, the integumentary system. So when you say integumentary system, a lot of people just think skin, and that would be partially correct. So what makes up the integumentary system? It is a system, so it's going to be including several structures. It's the skin, the layer under the skin called the hypodermis, and accessory structures such as hair and nails. Right? And all that together forms the integumentary system. The skin, on the other hand, is made up of two layers, the epidermis and the dermis. All right, so let's talk about some of these things. So I'm going to go ahead and draw the skin. All right. So I won't put hair and hair in it, but I will put some layers and to distinguish. Okay, so the skin is made up of two layers. A superficial layer called the epidermis. All right, and there is this wavy layer of cells. I should make it go beyond that. And then there's a lower layer called the dermis. The dermis, or derm, in Latin or Greek means skin. All right, so you go to see a dermatologist, right, which is a skin doctor. Let's see, I think it's called microdermabrasion, right? So derm refers to, rubbing off the superficial layers of the skin. So that term means skin. So, okay, there is a deeper layer called the hypodermis down here. The hypodermis is adipose tissue or fat, right? Connective tissue. That is not included in the skin. So the skin is made up of the epidermis and the dermis. Now the epidermis is made up of 5 layers. Okay, I'm going to write the name of each of the layers here. There is the stratum corneum, a stratum, it means layer, right? So stratum lucidum, stratum granulosum, stratum spinosum, and this one is called the stratum basale. I see the word base in it, so it is the deepest of the layers of the epidermis. One way I remember, there is like a little mnemonic for the epidermis. The layers of the epidermis would be, come, let's get sunburned. Okay, you don't want to do that, but anyway, come, let's get sunburned. That way you remember the order of the different layers, right? Corneum, lucidum, granulosum, spinosum, basale. All right, now there's a few things about this that are interesting. Of course, the stratum corneum is the most superficial layer. It is made up of stratified, so many layers of flat cells. Stratified squamous epithelial tissue, ET, I'm going to put ET there. Okay, so lots of layers of flat cells, which makes sense. They're dead, flat. They're filled with a protein called keratin, which is a waxy protein. All right, and a lot of layers, which means, good protection. The second layer, the lucidum, the term lucid it means clear. All right, so if you have a lucid thought, it means like a clear thought. So the stratum lucidum is actually only in thick skin. So it is missing where the skin is thinner. So missing in thin skin. All right, so like your face has very thin skin on it, and so it wouldn't have that stratum lucidum. Stratum granulosum, this is a place where the cells begin to die. All right, so cells are actually generated from the deeper layer, the basale layer, and within the stratum spinosum. Mitosis is occurring in those layers. And so mitosis, if you remember, is cell division, nuclear division plus cytokinesis, which is cytoplasm division. So anyway, so division is occurring down here, and as the cells divide, they push the layers up. So the cells are living here, but when it reaches this layer, the cells begin to die because this is where we begin to produce that waxy protein, and how it looks in the microscope is like very grainy or granular. So hence the name granulosum, because they saw in the slides that it was very grainy there. So the cells begin to die because they are filled with the keratin protein. All right, and so it loses their nucleus and it's just filled with this waxy protein. Stratum spinosum. This one is just named because when they used to prepare the skin, this layer would undergo osmosis, so the water would kind of be sucked out of it, and the cells would be like little spines on it. So anyway, so that was the name for that. And the stratum basale is the base, right? Basal layer. Now, remember, there's cells all here, and the cells are being pushed up, okay? But we have cells all along here. These cells are called keratinocytes. That's a type of cell. Okay, the keratinocyte is a cell. Cyte means cell, and that makes keratin. In addition, in this basal layer, there are specialized cells that have little projections that come out called melanocytes. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the melanocytes. So these guys are melanocytes. Also located within that stratum basale. Now the melanocytes are interesting because they produce a pigment called melanin. Melanin gives our skin color, right? So if you are darker skin, you have more melanin produced. So we all have, around the same amount of melanocytes, but the amount of melanin they produce varies based on your genetics, right? So we have cells that produce melanin, and they distribute that melanin to different cells. Now, there are different types of skin cancer, and one of them is called melanoma. So can become melanoma. All right, melanomas is a pretty bad skin cancer because often it's not caught until it's progressed. So melanoma is the cancer, and it arises from these melanocytes that are just regular skin pigment producing cells, right? Now you might think, well, what happens when you go in the sun and you get tan, right? So when I go in the sun, I get really tan. What's happening? Well, my melanocytes produce a lot of melanin. and distribute that to the cells that are nearby. And it can reach, 10, 20, I think up to like 100 or so cells where it can distribute that melanin. Why? Why do we tan? Why would the melanocytes deposit melanin in other cells? It's for protection, right? The UV light, okay, stimulates the production of melanin, and UV light can be damaging to our DNA in our cells. And so what the melanin does, it's a pigment, which means it's going to absorb the UV light. It kind of takes the hit for the cell, and the melanin will surround the nuclei of the cells in which it's deposited. And so the melanin, the pigment, will absorb that light and protect the DNA. Okay, so getting tan is a good thing, and it helps to protect your cells from mutations, right? UV light can cause mutations in your cells. All right, but then again, those same cells can become cancerous because, they are taking the hit. So the dermis is made up of 2 layers. There is a superficial papillary layer, and then a deeper reticular layer. Okay, made up of connective tissue, different types of connective tissue. The papillary layer is made up of areolar connective tissue, and then the deeper reticular layer is made up of dense irregular, not reticular connective tissue, which is something you might think, but it's actually dense irregular connective tissue. Kind of one of those things that wasn't labeled well. But anyway, and then we know that the deep layer under the skin is called the hypodermis, made up of fat. So another name for the hypodermis is subcutaneous layer, right? Subcutaneous is under the skin. So if you give a medication subcutaneous, that means you put that medication under the skin in the adipose tissue. All right. Let's see, what else do I want to say? Let's go back and take a look to see if we can answer the questions now on the study guide. If we go back there. Okay. All right, so now let's answer these questions. What are the 2 layers of the skin? Remember, the hypodermis is not part of the skin. That is the epidermis and the dermis, right? Okay. The epidermis and dermis, and then I'll fill it in just a second. What type of epithelium is found in the superficial layer, right? That's that stratum corneum. That's stratified squamous epithelium. A 3rd layer is found deep to the skin. What is it called? It's the hypodermis. And what type of connective tissue is found there? Adipose tissue, right? So now that we have that picture, we can answer those questions. And we can answer the next set of questions. Name the 5 layers found in the epidermis. So remember, that's the come, let's get sunburned. Okay, come, let's get sunburned. Which layer is absent in thin skin, right? Missing the stratum lucidum. In which layer are the melanocytes found? Stratum basale. And what type of cancer can arise? Melanoma. Okay. We can, answer the next question based on our picture, our drawing. And I would encourage you to draw it, right? There's something that happens in, especially in anatomy. Anatomy is such a, visual kind of descriptive kind of science, right? And so drawing it, for some reason, helps you to remember it more than just looking at a picture. So we can look at a picture, but and people can think, and this is just from experience, and people can think that they got it, right? By looking at the picture and, oh yeah, I got it. And then if I give them a blank piece of paper and ask them to draw it, A lot of people can't draw it, right? But so get in the habit with anatomy, especially, that you draw the structure. So if I draw it, then I expect you to go, at home, draw it also. All right. Now I do have some images I'll put on here in just a moment, but let's answer all the questions first. Name the two layers of the dermis and what type of connective tissue is found in each. So we have the two layers, right? The papillary layer, which is areolar connective tissue, and then the reticular, I'm going to make it a different, reticular layer made of dense irregular connective tissue. Okay, so now let me grab a few pictures. Let me grab, so this picture, and I'm going to add, tell you a couple things. Let me see where to put it. Okay, let's put it down here. All right, so here's a picture that's very similar to what I drew. I put a couple extra things in here. Blood vessels and nerves are found in the dermis. Okay, so deep, which tells you that if you get cut and you're bleeding, then you've gone deeper than the superficial layers of the epidermis, right? Let's see, and what else did I want to put? I think that's it. Okay, let me grab a couple other pictures. So this is something you might be seeing, these terms, in where you put medication, right? Intradermal would be within the dermis, subcutaneous, right? As I mentioned, in that hypodermis, under the skin. And then intramuscular would be deeper, deep to the skin and the hypodermis and into the muscle, right? So now, you're going to see these terms, but to understand where it is happening is very important. And here's a couple questions. Let's say you want to get a tattoo. Okay, you want to get a tattoo, and but you want to have it disappear before you go see your mom in a couple months. Where do you put that ink? But you want it to last a little bit and enjoy it, right? So you don't want to use one of those um, little sticker kind of things that you put on your surface of your skin, right? Because that just rubs off. So you actually want to have a tattoo for a little bit. Where do you put it? You make sure it's in the epidermis, that it's superficial to the stratum basale, because that's where mitosis is occurring, right? So if you put the ink here in these superficial layers, but maybe not right at the top, so maybe down here somewhere, then that ink stays there. And as the cells undergo mitosis and divide, it's going to push the layers up. So you get to keep that tattoo for a little bit, but eventually it will be sloughed off. We slough off our skin maybe, every month or 2 months, something like that. And, it moves to the top and eventually it's gone. That's why, you get a little cut, you get something on your skin, it disappears after a while, right? Because your skin layers are moving from the bottom up. If you want a permanent tattoo, where do you put that ink? You're going to put it in the dermis, right? Because you won't have mitosis and it won't be lost. All right, so little things that are important. Let's take a look. So what are some things that are found in the skin? These are the accessory type structures. The first one, wait, let me make sure okay. So the first accessory structures, as we call them, are called glands. Oh, wait, I have a couple more pictures. Let me grab. Oh, here's a nice picture, kind of a lot of things in the skin, right? So we have hair here. We have some glands. Here's one gland here, like a sweat gland here. Okay, I have one more picture. Oh, here's something interesting. The skin is very interesting. All right, so here is bigger. Showing you the direction of cell movement. All right, so here's the stratum basale, and you can see, these are cells, and then as we move up to the granulosum, they lose their nucleus. They just get filled with keratin, and eventually it's sloughed off. Now there is this layer or this kind of division between the dermis and the epidermis here. So if you've noticed, when I drew the epidermis and dermis, I drew the basale kind of like a wavy line. All right, that is that division. And so when we see this, sometimes layers can separate. So if you get a new pair of shoes or something and it's rubbing, and let's say you decide to go on a big hike and you think you're going to buy new hiking shoes and just put them on and go on a 10-mile hike. All right, well, it doesn't quite fit your feet and it's going to rub in certain areas. So those places where you have rubbing, it eventually can pull apart the dermis and the epidermis. And there can be a space there. And so that space becomes what? A blister, right? So that's where the separation occurs between the epidermis and dermis. It could be air filled. It could be filled with blood if you happen to hit a blood vessel in there, okay? It could be filled with fluid, tissue fluid, right? So that's where a blister would occur. If you have constant rubbing, I wonder what this little pencil is. It's like rubbing on your certain parts of your finger, you might get a callus. Or you could get a callus, on shoveling or whatever too. You get calluses with repeated, some stress there, repeated rubbing maybe. And it's an area where the skin is going to build up in response to that stress. You're going to make more layers, okay? All right, and then you get, things like calluses. So now let's take a look at some glands. There's two major types of glands. Let me grab it. The first type is a sebaceous gland. And we see a sebaceous gland in this picture here. Associated with the hair follicles are these little sebaceous glands that secrete a substance called sebum into that follicle, and it makes the hair flexible and waterproofs the hair. Okay. When we get an excess of sebum, okay, in adolescence, your sebaceous glands produce more sebum. Okay, that can build up in there, and you can get bacteria that actually use that excess sebum and then creates inflammation, and that's what acne is. All right. All right, but so the sebaceous glands are associated with the hair follicle, and we'll talk about hair in just a moment. The other type of gland are sweat glands, and these are found in the skin. Here's a sweat gland here, and these are ducts. And sweat glands, there's two different types of sweat glands. There's what's called a merocrine sweat gland, and this makes a kind of a watery secretion. So those are distributed all over your body, most numerous, and it makes this, watery secretion. So this is to help you thermoregulate, okay? Keeps us cool. So when we are working out, our body temperature increases, we got to cool off. So we make sweat, which is a lot of water, and it evaporates off our skin and lowers our temperature. The other type is called apocrine or apocrine glands. These are found in specific places in the armpits, the groin, and it makes a different solution that's not watery. It's a little more viscous, thicker, a little more thicker, and it can, with bacteria on your skin surface, can make body odor. Okay, so this actually is the smelly type of secretion. All right, let's take a look at the next one, which is the next type of accessory structure, which is a nail. All right, so a nail is an accessory structure that has different parts. Let me put the parts down and then I'll bring a picture and we can, well, I'll just kind of do it. Nope. All right, so here's our nail here and here. And let me just make sure. Okay, so there's different parts. We have the nail body. The nail body is what we think of when we think of the nail. It's the part we can see. And the nail body actually extends deep where we can't see it. So we call that the nail root, which, makes sense. The root of a plant is under the dirt or under the earth, and we can't see it. All right, so this is the root of the nail, and this is the body of the nail. There's a region, kind of a thickening of the skin here called the cuticle. In medical terms, it's the eponychium. And it's just the stratum corneum that's thickened and kind of extends outward onto the nail body. The nail bed is deep to the nail body. So I think of like a bed. You put your body on, you lay your body on the bed. So same with the nail. Underneath it is, just the surface of the skin, the epidermis is the nail bed. Okay, but it happens, we call it the nail bed because it's right under the nail body. Okay. We have the nail matrix. So the nail matrix is this deep part here at the end of the nail root. And this is where mitosis is occurring and cytokinesis, right? Cell division is occurring down here, which is causing the nail to extend upward and, to form the nail body. All right, so the matrix is the actual growing part of the nail that's going to move the nail up like this. Okay, that's why we got to cut our nails because it keeps growing. Lunula is this whitish part. So this kind of half moon shape. Think of Luna. Luna means moon. So lunula is this whitish area. It's pale. It's got a little, it's a little thicker stratum corneum underneath, so we can't see blood vessels. So if you look at your nail, everybody just kind of look at your nails right now, you can see kind of a pinkish part. And if you press on it, it changes color, right? Because it's thinner there, the stratum corneum, and you could see, or the skin, so you can see underlying blood vessels there. And in fact, it's used kind of diagnostically too. If you don't have really time to check someone's oxygen levels in their blood, you could just look at their nail. And if they're bluish, okay, it means low oxygen. Okay, so, and then the lunula, it's just thicker there, so you can't see the blood vessels in that area. Okay, and those are accessory structure nails. Let's take a look at the hair. Okay, I might want to draw this one. So I'll put these things here, then we'll try to draw it, and then I'll bring up the pictures. So the three parts of the hair are called the shaft, the root, and the bulb. And I put hair in front of it so we don't get confused. Hair shaft, hair root, hair bulb, because we have a nail root also. All right. What is three parts of the hair? What are the three layers? Ooh, okay. The three layers of the hair are the medulla, the cortex, and the cuticle. Okay. And I'm going to draw it in just a second. What pigment gives color to hair? It's melanin. Melanin gives color. And what causes goosebumps? It's a little muscle called the erector pili muscle. It's a type of smooth muscle, so it's involuntary. But if we look at our hair here, so here's the hair. Here's our sebaceous gland, and attached to the hair follicle, which I'll also draw, is this muscle called the erector pili muscle. And what it does is when we're scared or cold, this muscle contracts and it pulls the hair up and makes it stand up. So this gives us the goosebumps, the erector pili muscle. All right. And, why is it important? That's the one thing you should always ask is like, why do we have that? And, maybe for us, it's not as important, but if you're an animal and let's say you're scared, maybe someone's going to try to eat you, a predator, and you're a little bunny or something, the erector pili muscle makes your hair stand up and makes you look bigger. Okay. So it does have some, protective measure in that way. Another way, probably more important, would be its ability when the hair is raised to trap air in the spaces of the hair, between the hair and the skin, right? And so why is that important? That's why furry animals can live in the snow in cold regions, because their ability to insulate themselves by raising the hair and trapping warm air inside there. It keeps them warm. Okay, so let's go ahead and draw a picture and include the 3 parts of the hair and the 3 layers of the hair. All right, so let's go back. All right, so I'm going to turn this over and we're going to draw our hair. Okay, so let's first draw the hair like this. And we do have to put the surface of the skin here. Okay, I should have put it longer, but it doesn't really matter. So this part here that we see on the surface is called the hair shaft. The part underneath is called the hair root. Okay, I should have made my shaft longer and the root shorter, but that's okay. And then this lower part is called the hair bulb. Okay. Now surrounding the hair, we have a structure called the hair follicle. Okay, now the hair follicle is actually made up of several layers, but it's like a tube around the hair. This is called the hair follicle. And it's made up of different layers. There's the epidermal layer or epithelial layer, and then a deeper connective tissue layer. Okay, so those are the 3 parts of the hair. Down here, we do have blood vessels. And we have cells down here with melanocytes that, inject color into the hair. And there's a matrix down here where hair is being pushed upward. I'm going to take the hair and we're going to do a cross section through it to look at the layers of the hair. Okay. So the hair is made up of 3 layers. The inner layer is called the hair medulla. The next layer is the hair cortex. And the outer layer is the hair cuticle. And these 3 form the hair layers. So do you get the difference? These are not layers, okay? These are just the parts of the hair. But then when we look at a hair from a cross section, we can see that it's actually made up of different layers of hair. Then on the outside, we have the follicle, which is several layers, but we're just gonna together call this the hair follicle. Oops, sorry. Okay, so there's a lot to the hair. And it's a protective little tube around it. Have you ever like pulled out a hair and there's like white stuff around it? Okay, you pulled out the follicle with it, and that's all regenerated. Okay, if you happen to do that, don't pull out your hair. Okay, so let's go back. I'm going to bring up a couple pictures for our all right, so let's look at a little hair with our sebaceous gland. Okay, so here's our little sebaceous gland. Here's a sweat gland, and erector pili muscle. Okay, this is the epidermis. How do I know? Because there's this wavy line between the epidermis and the dermis. Blood vessels down here in the dermis. Okay, I'm going to get one more picture here. I don't have quite a cross section though, but anyway. So here we can see a little bit down here in the bulb. Okay, we have the outer tube, which is the follicle, and then this part on the inside is the actual hair. All right, lastly, burns. Put that down here. 3 different degrees of burns. And a little bit about each one. So classify them, but not only just tell me what are the names of the 3 types of burns, oops, but what distinguishes them from each other. Oh yeah. Okay. I want to make that out. So the 3 different types of burns are the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd degree. And it all depends, it's all based on the deepness of the injury, right? The damage, how far deep does it go? A 1st degree burn damages just the epidermis. Okay, it could be red, but there won't be any permanent scarring because remember, you renew your skin, the epidermis, after a while. So sometimes you get peeling as some of the superficial layers are damaged and then it peels off. All right, but nothing long term. 2nd degree burn, damage to the epidermis and maybe a little bit of the dermis. So you might get blistering. So that tells you that you went deeper, right? The blisters occur between the epidermis and the dermis. So if you have blisters, that means you went deeper. But usually there's no scarring. So even though your skin might blister, you won't get usually permanent scarring. The 3rd degree is damage to both the epidermis and dermis. Okay, so the dermis layers, you don't get that regeneration. You'll have some mitosis, but not like, the epidermis. And what else is there in the dermis? Blood vessels and also nerves. So your nerves are located in there. So the second part of that question is, why is the most damaging burn, the 3rd degree, the least painful, right? It has to do with those nerves. So if you damage the nerves, you don't have sensation, right? So, and that's the scary thing. If you say, oh, that doesn't hurt, okay, that's when it's the most dangerous. And so you want it to hurt because then your nerves are still intact, right? All right, and then I've got a beautiful picture for that. All right, 1st degree sunburn, 2nd degree blistering, 3rd degree just yuck and damage to nerves. Okay. All right. I think that'll do it for chapter 5. So it is chapter 5, right? Oh, right, chapter 5. Okay, so hopefully you got that. And the next step will be to take your chapter 5 quiz. Okay, and then will be your first exam, which will cover chapters 1 to 5. Okay, thanks for joining, or thanks for watching. See you next time.